I am live. I just have to do a couple of things here. Bring the exposure down just a little bit. And bring up the brightness just a hair. This is the fun part of my day. We're not going to auto white balance. That looks right. Apply that. Go back here. And we're good. Okay. Hello, William. Hello, Kathleen. Can you guys hear me? I hope you guys can hear me. I can't hear myself, so do I have any audio? Why don't I have any audio? One, two, three. I do have audio. Okay. I do have audio. I didn't think I had any audio. Good afternoon, Daniel Wright. Hello to Fred Kaz. Hello to David Sloan. Derek Matthews. Mark Baker. Everybody can hear me fine. The volume's a little low though. Okay. Well, we can punch that up a little bit. Well, we're already up at the top. Okay, well, let's see if I can punch this up a little bit. Is that any better? Move this in maybe a little bit more. All right. Okay, so we're in the pre-show. I've done a couple of things today that we're going to talk about. We're going to get into doing some what's the word I'm looking for here? We are going to get into doing some interesting stuff. Put that over there. What temps should I be printing ABS? Well, that's a very good question. The ABS, when you're printing with ABS, there's some things to keep in mind, and first and foremost is that you need to have an enclosure. I hope that you've got an enclosure, Derek, because if you don't, you're going to run into problems whether you have the right temperatures or not. Mainly your bed is going to be right around 95 to 100 Celsius, and your material should be in that 230, 235, 240 range, somewhere in there. And that should be just fine. Today's topic, while we're doing a little bit of a pre-show here, today's topic is all about getting you started with firmware. I've had a lot of requests for this lately. So today what we're going to do is we're going to dive in to talking a little bit about firmware, what it is, why we need it, and if you should upgrade your firmware or not. And then on Wednesday's show, I'm going to actually take you through the steps to set up firmware either for a brand new machine or for an existing machine. And then we're going to take a look at another firmware on Friday that has been produced by another company that is great for the CR10 and a whole handful of others. So we're going to look at that on Monday. So any other questions before we hop into the show in about 4 minutes? There's no countdown today because I'm at home. And for whatever reason, I can't see myself on Facebook, but I'm sure I'm coming through on Facebook, am I? We have video and audio. Kipler also by John. John, I'm not sure what you mean by Kipler also. But hello, John. Glad to see that you're here. Hey, there's Telly Montelli or Mantelli. Both fine on Facebook. Thank you very much. I'm not wearing my glasses today. I know that was kind of, I'm going to turn on my tablet because there's notes on my tablet today that I want to go through with you guys. I know that we're transmitting on Facebook and on YouTube, and we're also on Periscope today as well. I'm using OBS software for anybody that's interested. I'll do a different video on OBS software later on for anybody that's interested in live streaming. Alistair Creevy, I hope I got that right. You look good. Thanks. Thanks. I'm trying to, trying to make myself look better. My wife's table behind me doesn't look that good though. We share the chair. My desk is here, her desk is there, and we share the chair. So only one of us can be here at a time. Okay, John's saying he's going to get me a link, and it's part of Marlin. Okay, great. Cheryl says I'm coming through. Hey, Cheryl, how are you? As soon as my tablet starts up, we'll get things rocking and rolling. And it connects to my Wi-Fi. Tablets are fun, aren't they? No, not really. I've had this one now for a few years. This is a Samsung Galaxy something or other. Maybe I should be wearing my glasses today. I know yesterday they were just giving a heck of a glare, but I should. I'm nearsighted, but small text on a tablet doesn't work very well. There I go. Does everybody recognize me now? Okay. So 2 minutes and we'll get the show underway. We have no Frank today, so I'm operating everything. I am looking at my tablet, and we're going to talk a little bit about what is on my tablet today. So firmware, if you're not familiar with it, I'm not going to go too much into it. And there's some topics I'm not going to cover related to firmware today, but I will. There's a whole bunch of links that I've put in the YouTube description today. So if you are watching this, hey Donald, William Donald, how are you? If you are watching this for the first time on Facebook or YouTube, head over to the YouTube page. That way you can get access to all the links in the description below about stuff we're talking about today. No voice in the back today. Frank is not with me. Because it's family day here in Alberta. For anybody who doesn't know, it's family day and everybody's closed. So Spool 3D is closed. So they're not here. But let's get things underway and jump right into the show. So, do you need to upgrade your firmware? And that's what we're going to talk about today. So stick around. Hey, welcome to the show. My name is Richard Cleveland. I'm your host here on The First Layer. Today we are doing things a little differently. We're doing them from my home. If this is your first time here, please consider subscribing to our channel. All you got to do is hit that subscribe button down below and hit the little bell so you get notified every time that we do a brand new live episode or we upload a brand new episode. So today what we're talking about is, do you need to upgrade your firmware? But before we get into talking about upgrading your firmware, what we need to know first and foremost is what firmware is. And we're going to talk a little bit about that on today's show. So we're going to cut back to that camera. And firmware, just so everybody knows, and because I know that we've got new people that watch the show all the time, just so everybody knows, firmware is a program which resides on the printers. The firmware is the link between your software and hardware. It interprets commands from the G-code file and controls the motion accordingly. The firmware configuration is unique to your printer. like the dimensions or heating settings, it also plays a major role in the quality of your print. So that's really the basics of what firmware is. I have a couple of screenshots. How you need, what firmware do you use? Well, the most popular one out there is Marlin. Marlin is an open source project that you can certainly go and check out. I'm just going to go to Marlin right now. I can't see all your comments today, so we're going to do a little Q&A near the end. So just stick with me on that. So let's go into the Marlin page. All right, so here we are on the Marlin page. As I said, it's open source 3D printer firmware. I'm going to say that probably 80% of printers out on the market today, whether you're buying a built machine or you're buying a kit or you're building your own, are all going to work on Marlin firmware. And this firmware is totally customizable. It's been around for a long time. It is an open source project, so there's many people contributing to this firmware all the time. And how you get started is you just go ahead and hit the download button. It's going to take you into this page, which is the latest release of Marlin. And all you have to do is simply go up here and click the 1.1.x.zip file, and this currently is the 1.1.8 version of Marlin, so it is the latest stable release of Marlin. So first thing you want to do is download that, but then you need to have some way to access the files inside of Marlin. So the next thing that you want to download is the Arduino IDE. And you can get the Arduino IDE at www.arduino.cc. And Arduino, what that is, it's an open source prototyping platform, which again, 80 to 90% of your printers are running on some sort of Arduino package. Your board may not look like this, or you may actually have this board with another board stacked on top, called a ramps board. But in this case, you need to download the software, and all you're going to do is just click the software up at the top and navigate down to this area right here where it says download the Arduino IDE. And the latest version is 1.8.5. Download this, put it onto your computer, and then we can go ahead and open our firmware. But I wanted to show you guys that first and foremost. Now let's go ahead and open our firmware. I got to move this over so that I can see what I'm doing. There we go. Like I said, I'm a little disorganized today. So in our firmware, we've already unzipped it. So I'm going to open this up over here on this screen so that you guys can see it. I cut back to this screen. Now I've already unzipped the file that came from Arduino, and as you can see, the folder is Marlin 1.1.x, and I just put it on my desktop, and we'll open up that. We'll navigate our way to the Marlin folder. Once you're in the Marlin folder, you can scroll down till you see Marlin Arduino file. That's what you're looking for to open. So we're going to double click that, and it is now going to open up our Arduino software, which we've already previously downloaded. And we're just going to move this over here so you guys can see this as well. All right, so now we're in the Marlin firmware. And once you have the firmware, there's a couple of things that you need to do. And first we need to set up the port in which we are going to send the firmware to our printer, and your printer will hook up to your computer, whether it be a laptop or a desktop, through a USB cable. So in our case, we're going to go up to Tools. We already have Arduino Genuino Mega and Mega 2560 selected, and that is for the most part the one that you want to select on each and every startup for when you're trying to send something to your board. And your process should be the @Mega 2560 Mega 2560. Okay, so if you've got both of those selected, you're in good shape. And our serial port is on COM1, so we're just going to say COM1 for now. Once you're in there, general settings, we have to start by going into our configuration file. And you're going to find that in a tab right here up at the top. It's usually about the fourth one over if you're using the Arduino software. Or you're using, pardon me, the Marlin Firmware, their stable release. And then we're just going to scroll down, first of all, to setting our communication port. All of this stuff should be read. You should read this before mucking around inside your firmware, or any firmware for that matter. So what we want to do is we want to navigate down to the baud rate. And this is the baud rate in which your printer communicates with the Arduino board. And if you you have the wrong baud rate set, it can be not disastrous, but it won't send the file down. It'll give you an error. So to be on the safe side, mostly what we do is we change this to 115200. So that's 115/200 baud rate from 2500 baud rate. So you want to change that first and foremost. You want to also know what type of board you're using, and you can find the type of board that you're using inside the boards file. And if you can't find it, you'll see there is a little arrow right up in this corner where my mouse is now, and you can pull down and just scroll down to the boards.h file and just give that a click, and it will open up the boards.h file. And inside there, you're going to find a number of different boards. And this is the name that you want to use. Or you can also use the number. I prefer to use the name. And you can see there's all kinds in here, from Ultimaker boards to Rumba boards. There's a whole mess of different boards in here that you can pick from. So it's very important that you know what your printer has for a board. So let's go back to the configuration H file. We're going to come down to define custom machine name. This is where you can change the name on your 3D printer. So when it displays, you can see a name there. So Fred Kaz asks, can't you upgrade firmware in Cura and S3D? Yes, you can do that. You can do that via hex file. And if your manufacturer, and I wanted to bring this up as well, I was going to do it a little bit later, but I might as well do it now. Fred, if your manufacturer has an updated .hex file, HEX file, you can upload that through Cura and Simplify 3D to your printer via the USB cable. Same idea. What I'm trying to illustrate here today is I just kind of want to take you through the basics of what you're going to find inside these files. So now we're going to we've done the motherboard, and we're going to head down to this section right here where it says extruders. This defines the number of extruders on your machine. So in most cases we have one extruder, so all we want to do is we want to make sure that we hit this, make sure that this is set to 1. If we have more than 1, then we'll set it to 2, and we'll talk about that a little bit later on. The next important area is thermal settings. So we're going to scroll down till we get to the thermal settings, which is right here, starting at line 239. And I always turn on my numbers in Arduino so I can see what line numbers we're at. So here you're going to see a list of different thermistors, and these are the temperature sensors that are on your 3D printer, both on the bed and on the hot end as well. So you want to make sure that you're picking the right one. There's really three to use. There's 1, 3. If you're not sure, I always kind of leave it at 1. And 5 is another very common thermistor. The E3D V6 hot ends use the number 5 100K thermistor. This is a little bit of a different thermistor. Gives more accurate temperature readings, I think. But so then we're going to go down, and this is where you're going to find, starting at line 289, where you're going to change that. And if you only have one extruder, then you only need to change this number right here. You don't have to change all the rest, but you do want to change the number on the temperature bed sensor. And usually that's going to be a 1, a 2, or a 3. Sometimes it might be different than that, but mostly it's going to be a 1. Number 1 is pretty much the best one to use there. All right, so moving on down. I know this is boring to some people and it's kind of trivial, but this is one of those things that's very important for you to learn as you're progressing in 3D printing and in the 3D hobby. It's very important that you understand this. So now let's go down and define our temperatures on our heater. So we're going to go to minimum temperature, which is right here, starting at line 318. Minimum temperature is 5 degrees. So if it falls below 5 degrees, it's usually going to give you some sort of error. Then we want to set our maximum temperatures. In Marlin right now, your first heater is set to 275 degrees. This can be changed. Now, if you are using a stock hot end, 9 times out of 10, they have that little PTFE liner in them. So you're going to want to set this a little bit lower for your max temp so that you don't go over it. You want to put that somewhere around 250. And yeah, my computer's going crazy today, sorry. So if you want to, you can set that to 250, or you can just leave it at the default 275. But your bed temperature probably won't go over 110, so it's a good idea to change your max bed temperature to 210, 220 tops. Or pardon me, 110. 110 to 120. 110 to 120. We don't want to change this more. We don't want this to go over 120 because we can burn out the thermistor on there. Now, to prevent dangerous extrusion, there's another good one. You want to define prevent dangerous extrusion, so we're going to just look for that line, and I don't know where that line is off the top of my head, so you just have to bear with me. Now this area here, I want to talk about this really quick before I get to that defining of the extrusion. This is your PID settings. What this does is this tunes your hot end to work more efficiently and provide power properly to your hot end. And usually the one under Ultimaker is the one that you're going to change. And we'll get into PID tuning a little bit later on as well. There's also one for the bed. You can define the bed temp, and then you can go in there and certainly change that. We want to make sure that define cold, prevent cold extrusion is checked or is uncommented. You'll see these little double lines, double slashes. What those will do is they will comment out any particular line. So we want to make sure that those two lines are not uncommented. All right, so I'm losing my voice. Now we're going to get into thermal runaway. And this is a big one because what happens in thermal runaway is if you get an error that says thermal runaway, that means there's something wrong. Either it's heating up too fast, or it's not heating up fast enough, or it's exceeding the temperature that it's supposed to be sitting at. And on Wednesday's show, we're going to dive into these a little bit more. Today, we're just kind of really getting a brief overview of them. Now let's get into the mechanical settings. So we want to make sure that we've got our end stops defined. Use the minimum X plug in this case, so we can see that they're all undefined as we go through. Then we want to do the end stop areas. Now you can undefine these, but you really don't have to, because there's other commands later on down in here, mechanical end stops with COM and ground, which means common to ground, and NC to signal use equals false. So we're going to dive into more of that a little bit later as well. Movement settings. We want to make sure that our unit is not moving faster than our motors will allow it to. So these are the default settings, and you can usually find online what the steps per unit are for your X, Y, Z, and E0, or in this case, extruder 0 are, as well as your max feed rates. Those will change in a lot of cases. Default maximum acceleration is also going to change. What happens here with the default acceleration is this is millimeters per second. So this is moving 3,000 millimeters per second. That's quite fast. We can slow that down. Again, default acceleration is set to 3,000, and we're just going to keep on moving down. Now, the jerk settings, I get asked about this a lot as well. Jerk settings are something that you want to make sure that you're not they're not set too high, because if they're set too high, what happens? I'm going to use this little Raspberry Pi as an example. What happens is when they move too fast, they don't stop as fast as they should. They can't stop on a dime. They'll still move a little bit further, and same with coming back. And it's just momentum that is causing that. But the slower you move that axis, whether it be X, Y, or Z, the less amount of jerk you're going to have. So usually I set this down to around 8. Cody Spring says, late to the game, how is everybody? Cody, we are all doing very well. We're talking about Marlin Firmware. I'm just doing a brief overview of what's in it and what you can expect to find, and going from there. So now your Z probe. This is if you have some sort of mechanism that will probe the bed of your 3D printer, and we're not going to go into that. I'm going to skip right over that because we're not too much set up for that today. Now we're just going to make sure that we've got all of our directions set. We want to make sure that Z homing height is set to a specific software end stops. We don't have any. Bed leveling. This is a big one, because as you can see in here, we have auto bed leveling 3-point, we have auto bed leveling linear, auto bed leveling bilinear, auto bed leveling UBL, which is unified bed leveling, and mesh bed leveling. And we're going to talk about those again on Wednesday. I don't want to get into too much on those right at the moment. Wednesday, when we dive into this, I'm going to physically show you how to set all this stuff up. I just want to get through this now. We're going to talk a little bit about the different bed levelings later on. Unified, there's mesh, and we're just going to keep going down. We don't have to worry about the skew right now. Additional features. This is something that's very interesting. You can turn on the EEPROM settings inside of your 3D printer so that you can make adjustments within that file right on the printer's dial, and then you can write those to the EEPROM and they will stay in memory for you. So it's always a good idea to make sure that your EEPROM settings are turned on. We want to make sure that we are setting our temperatures correctly. Now these are preheat constraints, and basically there's two here. The first one is usually PLA, and the second one is ABS. You can see that there's no fan speed on either one. When you're doing a PID tune, it's a really good idea to make sure that you have that fan speed up 100% before you do the tune. Cody Spring says you can see I want to get a a Pi or some other type of tech because I'm afraid of leaving the printer on while I'm not at home, and I don't want to come home to my house burned down. And yes, I do know what you mean. And a Raspberry Pi is really good for that. You can set it up with Octopi, and that's going to be part of this series as well. We're going to be setting up Octopi in the upcoming weeks as well. So it's a great idea, but I want to keep going here. Now my voice is I'm just losing it. I don't know why. You can set up the patterns. You can do what's called a nozzle clean feature now. I have to do a little bit more research into this and see exactly how it works, but it seems like a pretty cool little idea. There's LCD support when you're building a new printer or upgrading your firmware on your own. You're not using somebody else's script. Then you're going to want to know what type of display you have and accordingly uncomment the ones that you need. And then just moving fast through there, you can see we've got Tronxy controllers, there's IC2 controllers, there's all kinds of different controllers. Now here's some extra features. In this first area, it relates to your fan. You can add LED strips now within the firmware. So if you wanted to add lights around your 3D printer, you could do that. And you can change the color on them. And then you have some servo activation and deactivation. And that's pretty much it for looking at the firmware. I'm going to close that down now. And that's just kind of a brief overview about what firmware is and kind of what you're going to be looking at when you're building out your firmware or making changes to upgrading your firmware. Now, do you need to upgrade your firmware? Not really, no. Most printers come with a proven firmware on them. Some cases, developers are lazy and they don't turn on certain things. I'm not going to mention any names, but we know who they are. With that said, you're not always going to be turning on certain things or turning off certain things. And there's really not a big necessity to jump in and out of using the firmware or updating your firmware. There are a lot of different guys out there that will do updates to firmware, and that's part of the open source community. And I urge you guys to go to the different forums on Facebook and throughout the web and try and get involved with some of the people that are out there, because if you don't and you try and do this on your own and you're not real familiar with it, then it can be a really big issue for you in the long run in order to get your printer up and running, because you could essentially brick your 3D printer. It can be recovered, unlike a phone in some cases, but it can be recovered. And again, that's a little bit more advanced. Today was all about just kind of touching on it. So I want to look at your questions here. If you've got any questions about firmware, I know a few people have had some. Over on Facebook, it doesn't look like we've got too many questions, but over here, Fred Kaz says, does the old saying work here? If it's not broke, don't mess with it. Absolutely. If it's not broke, don't mess with it. I build a lot of my own printers now, and you guys know that. So I've taken the extra steps to learning a little bit more about the software or the firmware that my computer or my printer is using. And the reason for that is that if you don't, then you can't fix it. It might cost you to get it fixed, or you might, in some people's cases, they aren't that advanced in 3D printing, so they don't know about Arduino software and Marlin Firmware and how they all work together. But I want you guys to learn a little bit. So on Wednesday, we're actually going to build out our firmware for another printer. One of my printers, actually, because I want to do an update on it. That being said, that's pretty much it. I think I covered everything that I wanted to cover today. Do you guys have any questions about firmware? Not seeing any just yet. So while you guys are thinking of questions to type to me, I want to thank Spool3D, spool3d.ca, for all of the assistance that they give myself. Otherwise, I'd be doing the show like this all the time, because the room behind that door is not ready for me to have a studio in the home. And yes, that is the back of a Stormtrooper helmet over there. Not a 3D printed Stormtrooper helmet. It is from the Black Series. But that being said, boy, my voice is just giving out today. I have to have a little coffee. If you're interested in supporting the show, um, print it right. Oh, let's go back to Spool 3D for starters. Spool3D.ca, print it right, print it with Spool 3D. They've got everything that you need, from printers, accessories, parts, and filaments. So go check them out online at spool3d.ca. And I thank Derek for all his assistance in allowing me to have a studio over at his shop. Hello, Don, the German printing nerd. Now, there are a couple of ways, if you're interested, to help support the show and help me to create content. You can buy me a coffee, and there's a link in the description down below on YouTube, or you can become a Patreon. We've got some stuff that we're doing for Patreons right now. My wife and I are designing some better rewards for those people. So if you're interested, you can become part of that. Or if you just want to buy me a coffee, buy me a coffee. I love coffee. We all know that. I drink coffee all the time. We do the show 3 times a week, as everybody knows. If you're new here and this is the first time, again, please consider subscribing to the channel and become a member of our Facebook group. A lot of great people over there in our Facebook group, and if I can't answer your question, most other people can. I'm not always all that smart, but there's a lot of people out there that have been 3D printing in our group a lot longer than I have. With that said, I think that's about it. For anybody that was around for my rant yesterday, thank you for sticking with me and hanging out with me yesterday afternoon or yesterday morning when I was a little bit upset about what was going on, in terms of the theft of STLs. And I should clear that up a little bit. Somebody contacted me yesterday and asked me a very important question. If you are printing for your friends and family, and your friends are helping you, your friends and family are helping you out with the cost of the filament, helping you to offset the cost of your filament, that is not stealing. It is when you take those files, claim them as your own, and then sell those files to other people. Or you are building a business on printing those files without contacting the artist first. Okay, I hope that clears things up for you guys. Have an awesome day to you too, Cody. Glad you came by today. I hope you got something out of today's show. So, just to clarify once again, no, it's not stealing if you download a file from Thingiverse and you print it off for a friend or your friends or family, and they want to help you out with the cost of your filament. That's not considered stealing. Not in my mind, anyway. In my mind, what is considered stealing is when you take those files, claim them as your own, and then go ahead and try and make a living off of those files, whether you're printing them and putting up on eBay or Etsy or wherever. So Cody's asking me, hey, when you get a factory SD card, is there any way to tell that it's no good? No, there really isn't, other than sticking it in the computer and finding out. Fred Cass says, have a good week, all. And you have a good week as well. We are going to be back on Wednesday. I will be bringing you another show. It won't be live. It's going to be pre-recorded because I got a lot of stuff to go through on that Arduino setup. but we are going to set up software. And then on Friday, we're going to take that software and we are going to actually upload it to the printer in real time. So you guys are going to get to see that. Okay, so with that being said, you guys have yourselves a great day. Thanks for joining me today. And until next time, keep printing, keep having fun, and enjoy a good cup of joe. Have a great day, everybody.